Location and nature of Arab tribes. MSA. Beyond a shadow of doubt, the biography of Prophet Muhammad pbuh manifestly represents an exhaustive embodiment of the sublime divine message that he communicated in order to deliver the human race from the swamp of darkness and polytheism to the paradise of light and monotheism. An image, authentic as well as comprehensive, of this message is therefore only attainable through careful study and profound analysis of both backgrounds and issues of such a biography. In view of this, a whole chapter is here introduced about the nature and development of Arab tribes prior to Islam as well as the circumstantial environment that enwrapped the Prophet's mission. Location of the Arabs. Linguistically, the word Arab means deserts and waste barren land well nigh waterless and treeless. Ever since the dawn of history, the Arabian Peninsula and its people have been called as such. The Arabian Peninsula is enclosed in the west by the Red Sea and Sinai, in the east by the Arabian Gulf, in the south by the Arabian Sea, which is an extension of the Indian Ocean, and in the north by Old Syria and part of Iraq. The area is estimated between 1 million and 1.25 million square miles. Thanks to its geographical position, the peninsula has always maintained great importance. Considering its internal setting, it is mostly deserts and sandy places, which has rendered it inaccessible to foreigners and invaders, and allowed its people complete liberty and independence through the ages, despite the presence of two neighboring great empires. Its external setting, on the other hand, caused it to be the center of the Old World, and provided it with sea and land links with most nations at the time. Thanks to this strategic position, the Arabian Peninsula had become the center for trade, culture, religion and art. Arab tribes. Arab kinfolks have been divided according to lineage into 3 groups. 1. Perishing Arabs. The ancient Arabs, of whose history little is known, and of whom were Ad, Tham, Tassam, Jadis, Emlak, and others. 2. Pure Arabs, who originated from the progeny of Yarub bin Yashjab bin Qahtan. They were also called Qahtanian Arabs. 3. Arabized Arabs, who originated from the progeny of Ishmael. They were also called Adnanian Arabs. The pure Arabs, the people of Qahtan, originally lived in Yemen and comprised many tribes, 2 of which were very famous. A. Himyar, the most famous of whose septs were Zayd el-Jamhur, Qudaa and Sakasich. 8. Msa. B. Colin, the most famous of whose septs were Hamdan, Anmar, Tai, Mudij, Kinda, Lakum, Judam, Azd, Oz, Khazraj and the descendants of Japhna, the kings of Old Syria. Colin's septs emigrated from Yemen to dwell in the different parts of the Arabian Peninsula prior to the Great Flood Sale al-Arim of Marib Dam, due to the failure of trade under the Roman pressure and domain on both sea and land trade routes, following Roman occupation of Egypt and Syria. Naturally enough, the competition between Colin and Himyar led to the evacuation of the first and the settlement of the second in Yemen. The emigrating septs of Colin can be divided into 4 groups. 1. Azd, who, under the leadership of Imran bin Amr Muzaykub, number 146, wandered in Yemen, sent pioneers and finally headed northwards. Details of their emigration can be summed up as follows. Thalaba bin Amr left his tribe Al-Azd for Hijaz and dwelt between Thalabiyah and Dhikar. When he gained strength, he headed for Madinah, where he stayed. Of his seed are Oz and Khazraj, sons of Haritha bin Thalaba. Haritha bin Amr, known as Khuzaa, wandered with his folks in Hijaz until they came to Mar az-Zaran. Later, they conquered the Haram and settled in Makkah after having driven away its people, the tribe of Jurhum. Imran bin Amr and his folks went to Oman, where they established the tribe of Azd, whose children inhabited Tihama and were known as Azd of Shanwa. Japhna bin Amr and his family headed for Syria, where he settled and initiated the kingdom of Ghassan, who was so named after a spring of water, in Hijaz, where they stopped on their way to Syria. 2. Lakum and Judam, of whom was Nasr bin Rabia, father of Manadira, kings of Hira. 3. Banu Tai, who also emigrated northwards to settle by the so-called Asia and Salma Mountains, which were consequently named as Tai Mountains. 4. Kinda, who dwelt in Bahrain but were expelled to Hadramaut and Najd, where they instituted a powerful government, but not for long, for the whole tribe soon faded away. Another tribe of Himyar, known as Qudaa, also left Yemen and dwelt in Samawa, semi-desert on the borders of Iraq. The Arabized Arabs go back in ancestry to their great-grandfather Abraham, AWS, from a town called Ar, near Kufa on the west bank of the Euphrates in Iraq. Excavations brought to light great details of the town, Abraham's family, and the prevalent religions and social circumstances. Tafhim ul-Quran, 1553, it is known that Abraham, AWS, left Ar for Haran and then for Palestine, which he made headquarters for his message. He wandered all over the area. When he went, 9. Msa Niu, to Egypt, the Pharaoh tried to do evil to his wife Sarah, but all saved her, and the Pharaoh's wicked scheme recoiled on him. He thus came to realize her strong attachment to all, and, in acknowledgement of her grace, the Pharaoh rendered his daughter Hagar at Sarah's service, but Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham as a wife. Bukhari 1474. Abraham returned to Palestine where Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. Sarah became so jealous of Hagar that she forced Abraham to send Hagar and her baby away to a plantless valley on a small hill in Hijaz, by the sacred house, exposed to the wearing of floods coming right and left. He chose for them a place under a lofty tree above Zamzam near the upper side of the mosque in Makkah where neither people nor water was available, and went back to Palestine leaving with his wife and baby a leather case with some dates and a pot of water. Not before long, they ran out of both food and water, but thanks to Allah's favor water gushed forth to sustain them for some time. The whole story of Zamzam spring is already known to everybody. Bukhari 1475. Another Yemeni tribe, Jurhum II, came and lived in Makkah upon Hagar's permission, after being said to have lived in the valleys around Makkah. It is mentioned in the Sahih al-Bukhari that this tribe came to Makkah before Ishmael was a young man, while they had passed through that valley long before this event. Abraham used to go to Makkah every now and then to see his wife and son. The number of these journeys is still unknown, but authentic historical resources spoke of 4 ones. All, the Sublime, stated in the Noble Core, that he had Abraham see, in his dream, that he slaughtered his son Ishmael, and therefore Abraham stood up to fulfill his order. Then, when they had both submitted themselves to the will of all, and he had laid him prostrate on his forehead or on the side of his forehead for slaughtering, and we called out to him, O Abraham, you have fulfilled the dream vision. Verily, thus do we reward the Muhsin, good doers, who perform good deeds totally for all, sake only, without any show-off or to gain praise or fame, etc. And do them in accordance to Allah's orders. Verily, that indeed was a manifest trial, and we ransomed him with a great sacrifice, i.e. a ram. 37 to 103-107. It is mentioned in the Genesis that Ishmael was 13 years older than his brother Ishaq. The sequence of the story of the sacrifice of Ishmael shows that it really happened before Ishaq's birth, and that Allah's promise to give Abraham another son, Ishaq, came after narration of the whole story. This story spoke of one journey, at least, before Ishmael became a young man. Al-Bukhari, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, reported the other 3 journeys, a summary of which goes as follows. When Ishmael became a young man, he learned Arabic at the hand of the tribe of Jurhum, who loved him with great admiration and gave him one of their women as a wife, soon after his mother died. Having wanted to see his wife and son again, 10. Msa Niu. Abraham came to Makkah, after Ishmael's marriage, but he didn't find him at home. He asked Ishmael's wife about her husband and how they were doing. She complained of poverty, so he asked her to tell Ishmael to change his doorstep. Ishmael understood the message, divorced his wife and got married to the daughter of Mudad bin Amr, chief of the tribe of Jurhum. Kab Jazirat al-Arab, p. 230. Once more, Abraham came to see his son, but again didn't find him at home. He asked his new wife the same previous question, to which she thanked all. Abraham asked her to tell Ishmael to keep his doorstep, i.e. to keep her as wife, and went back to Palestine. A third time, Abraham came to Makkah to find Ishmael sharpening an arrow under a lofty tree near Zamzam. The meeting, after a very long journey of separation, was very touching for a father so affectionate and a so dutiful and righteous son. This time, father and son built Al-Kaaba and raised its pillars, and Abraham, in compliance with Allah's commandment, called unto people to make pilgrimage to it. By the grace of all, Ishmael had 12 sons from the daughter of Mudad, whose names were Nabat, Chedar, Edbail, Mebsham, Mishma, Duma, Micah, Hudud, Yetma, Yetor, Naphis and Kidman, and who ultimately formed 12 tribes inhabiting Makkah and trading between Yemen, geographical Syria and Egypt. Later on, these tribes spread all over, and even outside, the peninsula. All their tidings went into oblivion except for the descendants of Nabad and Chedar. The Nabataeans, sons of Nabad, established a flourishing civilization in the north of Hijaz. They instituted a powerful government which spread out its domain over all neighboring tribes, and made Petra their capital. Nobody dared challenge their authority until the Romans came and managed to eliminate their kingdom. After extensive research and painstaking investigation, Mr. Sulayman and Nadwi came to the conclusion that the Ghassanid kings, along with the Aus and Khazraj, were not likely to be Catanians but rather Nabataeans. Tariq Ard al-Quran 278-86, descendants of Chedar, the son of Ishmael, lived long in Makkah, increasing in number. Of them issued Adnan and son Ma'ad, to whom Adnanian Arabs traced back their ancestry. Adnan is the 21st grandfather in the series of the prophetic ancestry. It was said that whenever Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, spoke of his ancestry, he would stop at Adnan and say, "Genealogists tell lies," and did not go farther than him. A group of scholars, however, favored the probability of going beyond Adnan, attaching no significance to the aforementioned prophetic hadith. They went on to say that there were exactly 40 fathers between Adnan and Abraham, AWS. Rahmat ul-Lil Alamin 2/7-17. Nizar, Ma'ad's only son, had 4 sons who branched out into 4 great tribes, Ayad, Anmar, Rabia and Mudar. These last 2 sub-branched into several septs. Rabia fathered Asad, Anaza, Abdul Qais, and Wail's 2 sons Bakr and Taglib, Hanifa and many others. Mudar tribes branched out into 2 great divisions, Qais, Alan bin Mudar and Seps, of Elias bin Mudar. Of Qais, Alan were the Banu Salim, Banu Hawazin, and Banu Ghatafan, of whom descended Abs, Zubian, Ashsha, and Ghani bin Ashur. Of Elias bin Mudar were Tamim bin Murrah, Hudhail bin Mudrika, Banu Asad bin Khuzaimah and 11. Msa Niu. Seps of Kanana bin Khuzaimah, of whom came Quraysh, the descendants of Far bin Malik bin and Nader bin Kanana. Quraysh branched out into various tribes, the most famous of whom were Juma, Sam, Adi, Mazam, Tayyam, Zara, and the 3 seps of Qusay bin Kilab, Abdud, Dar bin Qusay, Asad bin Abdul, Uzza bin Qusay, and Abd Manaf bin Qusay. Abd Manaf branched out into 4 tribes, Abd Shams, Nafel, Mutalib and Hashim. It is, however, from the family of Hashim that all selected Prophet Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim, pbuh. Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, said, all selected Ishmael from the sons of Abraham, Kanana from the sons of Ishmael, Quraysh from the sons of Kanana, Hashim from the sons of Quraysh, and he selected me from the sons of Hashim. Muslim 2/245, Tirmidhi 2/201, Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib quoted the Messenger of all, pbuh, as saying, all created mankind and chose me from the best whereof, he chose the tribes and selected me from the best whereof, and he chose families and selected me from the best whereof. I am the very best in person and family. Tirmidhi 2/201, having increased in number, children of Adnan, in pursuit of pastures and water, spread out over various parts of Arabia. The tribe of Abdul Qais, together with some seps of Bakr bin Wail and Tamim, emigrated to Bahrain where they dwelt. Banu Hanifa bin Sab bin Ali bin Bakr went to settle in Hiyar, the capital of Yamama. All the tribes of Bakr bin Wail lived in an area of land which included Yamama, Bahrain, Saif Kazima, the seashore, the outer borders of Iraq, Abla and Hayt. Most of the tribe of Taglib lived in the Euphrates area, while some of them lived with Bakr. Banu Tamim lived in Basra semi-desert. Banu Salim lived in the vicinity of Madinah on the land stretching from Wadi al-Qura to Khaybar onwards to the eastern mountains to Hira. Thaqif dwelt in Taif and Hawazin east of Makkah near Ataz on the road from Makkah to Basra. Banu Asad lived on the land east of Taim, number 146, and west of Kufa, while family of Tai lived between Banu Asad and Taim, number 146. They were 5-day walk far from Kufa. Zubian inhabited the plot of and between Taim, number 146, and Haran, 12. Msa Niu. Some seps of Kanana lived in Tihama, while seps of Quraysh dwelt in Makkah and its suburbs. Quraysh remained completely disunited until Qusay bin Kilab managed to rally their ranks on honorable terms, attaching major prominence to their status and importance. Muhadrat Tariq al-Umam al-Islamiyya 115-16, 13. Rulership and princeship among the Arabs. MSA Niu. When talking about the Arabs before Islam, we deem it necessary to draw a mini-picture of the history of rulership, princeship, sectarianism and the religious dominations of the Arabs, so as to facilitate the understanding of emergent circumstances when Islam appeared. When the sun of Islam rose, rulers of Arabia were of two kinds: crowned kings, who were in fact not independent, and heads of tribes and clans, who enjoyed the same authorities and privileges possessed by crowned kings and were mostly independent, though some of whom could have shown some kind of submission to a crowned king. The crowned kings were only those of Yemen, Hira and Ghassan. All other rulers of Arabia were non-crowned. Rulership in Yemen. The folks of Sheba were one of the oldest nations of the pure Arabs, who lived in Yemen. Excavations brought to light their existence 25 centuries BC. Their civilization flourished, and their domain spread 11 centuries BC. It is possible to divide their ages according to the following estimation. 1. The centuries before 650 BC, during which their kings were called Makrib, Sheba. Their capital was Sawa, also known as Kriba, whose ruins lie in a spot a day's walk from the western side of Marib. During this period, they started building the Dam of Marib, which had great importance in the history of Yemen. Sheba was also said to have had so great a domain that they had colonies inside and outside Arabia, too. From 650 BC until 115 BC. During this era, they gave up the name Makrib and assumed the designation of kings of Sheba. They also made Marib their capital instead of Sawa. The ruins of Marib lie at a distance of 60 miles east of Sana'a. 3. From 115 BC until 300 AD. During this period, the tribe of Himyar conquered the kingdom of Sheba and took Ridan for capital instead of Marib. Later on, Ridan was called Zafar. Its ruins still lie on Mudawar mountain, near the town of Yaram. During this period, they began to decline and fall. Their trade failed to a very great extent, firstly, because of the Nubidian domain over the north of Hijaz. Secondly, because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria and the north of Hijaz. And thirdly, because of the intertribal warfare. Thanks to the three above-mentioned factors, families of Khatan were disunited and scattered out. 4. From 300 AD until Islam dawned on Yemen. This period witnessed a lot of disorder and turmoil. The great many and civil wars rendered the people of Yemen liable to foreign subjection and hence loss of independence. During this era, the Romans conquered Adn and even helped the Abyssinians, Ethiopians to occupy Yemen for the first time in 340 AD, making use of the constant intra-tribal conflict of Hamdan and Himyar. The Abyssinian, Ethiopian occupation of Yemen lasted until 378 AD, whereafter Yemen regained its independence. Later on, cracks began to show in Marib Dam, which led to the Great Flood 450 or 451 AD mentioned in the Noble Core. 14. Msa Niu. This was a great event which caused the fall of the entire Yemeni civilization, and the dispersal of the nations living therein. In 523, Du Nawaz, a Jew, dispatched a great campaign against the Christians of Najran in order to force them to convert into Judaism. Having refused to do so, they were thrown alive into a big ditch where a great fire had been set. The Qur referred to this event, "Cursed were the people of the ditch." Al-Quran 85-4. This aroused great wrath among the Christians, and especially the Roman emperors, who not only instigated the Abyssinians Ethiopians against Arabs but also assembled a large fleet which helped the Abyssinian Ethiopian army, of 70,000 warriors, to effect a second conquest of Yemen in 525 AD, under the leadership of Ariad, who was granted rulership over Yemen, a position he held until he was assassinated by one of his army leaders, Abraha, who, after reconciliation with the king of Abyssinia, took rulership over Yemen and, later on, deployed his soldiers to demolish Al-Kaaba, and, hence, he and his soldiers came to be known as the Men of the Elephant. After the elephant incident, the people of Yemen, under the leadership of Madakarab bin Saif du Yazin al-Himyari, and through Persian assistance, revolted against the Abyssinian Ethiopian invaders, restored independence and appointed Madakarab as their king. However, Madakarab was assassinated by an Abyssinian Ethiopian. He used to have him around for service and protection. The family of Du Yazan was thus deprived of royalty forever. Kisra, the Persian king, appointed a Persian ruler over Sana'a and thus made Yemen a Persian colony. Persian rulers maintained rulership of Yemen until Badan, the last of them, embraced Islam in 638 AD, thus terminating the Persian domain over Yemen. Rulership in Hira. Ever since Koresh the Great 557 to 529 BC united the Persians, they ruled Iraq and its neighborhood. Nobody could shake off their authority until Alexander the Great vanquished their king Dara I and thus subdued the Persians in 326 BC. Persian lands were thenceforth divided and ruled by kings known as the kings of sects, an era which lasted until 230 AD. Meanwhile, the Khatanians occupied some Iraqi territories, and were later followed by some Adnanians who managed to share some parts of Mesopotamia with them. The Persians, under the leadership of Ardashir, who had established the Sasanian state in 226 AD, regained enough unity and power to subdue the Arabs living in the vicinity of their kingdom, and force Qudaa to leave for Syria, leaving the people of Hira and Anbar under the Persian domain. During the time of Ardashir, Juzayma al-Wada exercised rulership over Hira, Rabia and Mudir, and Mesopotamia. Ardashir had reckoned that it was impossible for him to rule the Arabs directly and prevent them from attacking his borders unless he appointed as king one of them who enjoyed support and power of his tribe. He had also seen that he could make use of them against the Byzantine kings who always used to harass him. At the same time, the Arabs of Iraq could face the Arabs, 15 Msa of Syria who were in the hold of Byzantine kings. However, he deemed it fit to keep a Persian battalion under command of the king of Hira to be used against those Arabs who might rebel against him. After the death of Juzayma around 268 AD, Amr bin Adi bin Nasr al-Lakhmi was appointed as king by the Persian king Sabur bin Ardashir. Amr was the first of the Lakhmi kings who ruled Hira until the Persians appointed Qabas bin Feruz, in whose reign appeared someone called Mazdak, who called for dissoluteness in social life. Qabas, and many of his subjects, embraced Mazdak's religion and even called upon the king of Hira, al-Munzir bin Ma, as Sama, to follow after. When the latter, because of his pride and self-respect, rejected their orders, Qabas discharged him and nominated Harith bin Amr bin Hajar al-Kindi, who had accepted the Mazdaki doctrine. No sooner did Kisra-anu Sherwan succeed Qabas than he, due to hatred of Mazdak's philosophy, killed Mazdak and many of his followers, restored Munzir to the throne of Hira and gave orders to summon under arrest Harith, who sought refuge with al-Kalb tribe where he spent the rest of his life. Sons of al-Munzir bin Ma, as Sama, maintained kingship a long time until An-Numan bin al-Munzir took over. Because of a calumny borne by Zayd bin Adi al-Abadi, the Persian king got angry with An-Numan and summoned him to his palace. An-Numan went secretly to Hani bin Masad, chief of Shaban tribe, and left his wealth and family under the latter's protection, and then presented himself before the Persian king, who immediately threw him into prison where he perished. Kisra, then, appointed Ilyas bin Qubaisa at Tai as king of Hira. Ilyas was ordered to tell Hani bin Masad to deliver An-Numan's charge up to Kisra. No sooner than had the Persian king received the fanatically motivated rejection on the part of the Arab chief, he declared war against the tribe of Shaban and mobilized his troops and warriors under the leadership of King Ilyas to a place called Di-Kar, which witnessed a most furious battle wherein the Persians were severely routed by the Arabs for the first time in history. That was very soon after the birth of Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, 8 months after Ilyas bin Qubaisa's rise to power over Hira. After Ilyas, a Persian ruler was appointed over Hira, but in 632 AD the authority there returned to the family of Lukum when al-Munzir al-Ma'rur took over. Hardly had the latter's reign lasted for 8 months when Khalid bin al-Walid fell upon him with Muslim soldiers. Muhadrat Tariq al-Umam al-Islamiyya 129-32, rulership in geographical Syria. In the process of the tribal emigrations, some septs of Qudaa reached the borders of Syria where they settled down. They belonged to the family of Sula bin Halwan, of whose offspring were the sons of Dujam bin Sula known as Ad-Duyaima. Such septs of Qudaa were used by the Byzantines in the defense of the Byzantine borders, against both Arab Bedouin raiders and the Persians, and enjoyed autonomy for a considerable phase of time which is said to have lasted for the whole 2nd century AD. One of their most famous kings was Ziyad bin al-Habula. Their authority however, came to an end upon defeat by the Ghassanides, who were consequently granted the proxy rulership over the Arabs of Syria and had Dumad al-Jandal as their headquarters, which lasted until the Battle of Yarmouk in the year 13 AH their last. 16. Msa Niu. King Jabala bin al-Ihum embraced Islam during the reign of the chief of believers, Umar bin al-Khattab, r. Muhadrat Tariq al-Umam al-Islamiyya 134th, Tariq Ard al-Quran 280th-82, rulership in Hijaz. Ishmael, AWS, administered authority over Makkah as well as custodianship of the holy sanctuary throughout his lifetime. Upon his death, at the age of 137, two of his sons, Nabit and Chidar, succeeded him. Later on, their maternal grandfather, Mudad bin Amr al-Jarumi, took over, thus transferring rulership over Makkah to the tribe of Jurhum, preserving a venerable position, though very little authority for Ishmael's sons due to their father's exploits in building the holy sanctuary, a position they held until the decline of the tribe of Jurhum shortly before the rise of Bukhtanasar. Ibn Hisham 111th. The political role of the Adnanides had begun to gain firmer grounds in Makkah, which could be clearly attested by the fact that upon Bukhtanasar's first invasion of the Arabs in Irq, the leader of the Arabs was not from Jurhum. Kab Jazirat al-Arab, p.230, upon Bukhtanasar's second invasion in 587 BC, however, the Adnanides were frightened out to Yemen, while Burmiya and Nabi fled to Syria with Ma'ad, but when Bukhtanasar's pressure lessened, Ma'ad returned to Makkah to find none of the tribe of Jurhum except Jersham bin Jalhama, whose daughter, Mu'ana, was given to Ma'ad as wife, who, later, had a son by him named Nizar. Ramad ul-Lil Alamin, 248. On account of difficult living conditions and destitution prevalent in Makkah, the tribe of Jurhum began to ill-treat visitors of the holy sanctuary and extort its funds, which aroused resentment and hatred of the Adnanides sons of Bakr bin Abd Munaf bin Kanana, who, with the help of the tribe of Khuza'ah that had come to settle in a neighboring area called Mar az-Zaran, invaded Jurhum and frightened them out of Makkah, leaving rulership to Quda'ah in the middle of the 2nd century AD. Upon leaving Makkah, Jurhum filled up the well of Zamzam, leveled its place and buried a great many things in it. Amr bin al-Harith bin Mudad al-Jarumi was reported by Ibn Ishaq, the well-known historian, to have buried the 2 gold deer, together with the black stone as well as a lot of jewelry and swords in Zamzam, prior to their sorrowful escape to Yemen. Ibn Hisham 114,115. Ishmael's epic is estimated to have lasted for 20 centuries BC, which means that Jurhum stayed in Makkah for 21 centuries and held rulership there for about 20 centuries. Upon defeat of Jurhum, the tribe of Khuza'ah monopolized rulership over Makkah. Mudar tribes, however, enjoyed 3 privileges. The first, leading pilgrims from Arafat to Muzdalifah and then from Mina to the Aqaba stoning pillar. This was the authority of the family of al-Ghath bin Murrah, one of the septs of Elias bin Mudar, who were called Sofa. This privilege meant that the pilgrims were not allowed to throw stones at al-Aqaba until one of the Sofa. 17. Msa Niu. Men did that, when they had finished stoning and wanted to leave the valley of Mina, Sofa, men stood on the 2 sides of al-Aqaba and nobody would pass that position until the men of Sofa passed and cleared the way for the pilgrims. When Sofa perished, the family of Sa'd bin Zayd Manat from Tamim tribe took over. The second, al-Ifada, leaving for Mina after Muzdalifah on sacrifice morning, and this was the responsibility of the family of Adwin. The third, deferment of the sacred months, and this was the responsibility of the family of Tamim bin Adi from Bani Kanana. Khuza'ah's reign in Makkah lasted for 300 years, during which the Adnanides spread all over Najd and the sides of Bahrain and Iraq, while small septs of Quraysh remained on the sides of Makkah. They were Halul, Haram and some families of Kanana. They enjoyed no privileges in Makkah or in the sacred house until the appearance of Qusay bin Kilab, whose father is said to have died when he was still a baby, and whose mother was subsequently married to Rabia bin Haram, from the tribe of Bani Udra. Rabia took his wife and her baby to his homeland on the borders of Syria. When Qusay became a young man, he returned to Makkah, which was ruled by Halil bin Habsha from Khuza'ah, who gave Qusay his daughter, Haba, as wife. After Halil's death, a war between Khuza'ah and Quraysh broke out and resulted in Qusay's taking hold of Makkah and the sacred house. Ibn Hisham 117th. The reasons of this war have been illustrated in 3 versions. The first, having noticed the spread of his offspring, increase of his property and exalt of his honor after Halil's death, Qusay found himself more entitled to shoulder responsibility of rulership over Makkah and custodianship of the sacred house than the tribes of Khuza'ah and Bani Bakr. He also advocated that Quraysh were the chiefs of Ishmael's descendants. Therefore he consulted some men from Quraysh and Kanana concerning his desire to evacuate Khuza'ah and Bani Bakr from Makkah. They took a liking to his opinion and supported him. The second, Khuza'ah claimed that Halil requested Qusay to hold custodianship of Al-Kaaba and rulership over Makkah after his death. The third, Halil gave the right of Al-Kaaba service to his daughter Haba and appointed Abu Gabshan al-Khuzai to function as her agent whereof. Upon Halil's death, Qusay bought this right for a leather bag of wine, which aroused dissatisfaction among the men of Khuza'ah, and they tried to keep the custodianship of the sacred house away from Qusay. The latter, however, with the help of Quraysh and Kanana, managed to take over and even to expel Khuza'ah completely from Makkah. Rahmat ul-Lil Alamin 255. Whatever the truth might have been, the whole affair resulted in the deprivation of Sofa of their privileges, previously mentioned, evacuation of Khuza'ah and Bakr from Makkah and transfer of rulership over Makkah and custodianship of the holy sanctuary to Qusay, after fierce wars between Qusay and Khuza'ah inflicting heavy casualties on both sides, reconciliation and then arbitration of Yamr bin Awf from the tribe of Bakr, whose judgment entailed eligibility of Qusay's rulership over 18. Msa Niu. Makkah and custodianship of the sacred house, Qusay's irresponsibility for Khuza'ah's bloodshed, and imposition of blood money on Khuza'ah. Qusay's reign over Makkah and the sacred house began in 440 AD and allowed him, and Quraysh afterwards, absolute rulership over Makkah and undisputed custodianship of the sacred house, to which Arabs from all over Arabia came to pay homage. Qusay brought his kinspeople to Makkah and allocated it to them, allowing Quraysh some dwellings there. In Nusas, the families of Safwan, Adwan, Murrah bin Awf, preserved the same rights they used to enjoy before his arrival. Ibn Hisham 124. A significant achievement credited to Qusay was the establishment of an Nadwa house and assembly house on the northern side of Al-Kaaba Mosque, to serve as a meeting place for Quraysh. This very house had benefited Quraysh a lot because it secured unity of opinions amongst them and cordial solution to their problem. Ibn Hisham 125. Akbar al-Kiram p.152. Qusay, however, enjoyed the following privileges of leadership and honor. 1. Presiding over a Nadwa house meetings where consultations relating to serious issues were conducted, and marriage contracts were announced. 2. The standard he monopolized in his hand issues relevant to war launching. 3. Doorkeeping of Al-Kaaba. He was the only one eligible to open its gate, and was responsible for its service and protection. 4. Providing water for the pilgrims. This means that he used to fill basins, sweetened by dates and raisins for the pilgrims to drink. 5. Feeding pilgrims. This means making food for pilgrims who could not afford it. Qusay even imposed on Quraysh annual land tax, paid at the season of pilgrimage, for food. Ibn Hisham 130. It is noteworthy, however, that Qusay singled out Abd Manaf, a son of his, for honor and prestige, though he was not his elder son, Abd ad-Dar was, and entrusted him with such responsibilities as chairing of an Nadwa house, the standard, the doorkeeping of Al-Kaaba, providing water and food for pilgrims. Due to the fact that Qusay's deeds were regarded as unquestionable and his orders inviolable, his death gave no rise to conflicts among his sons, but it later did among his grandchildren, for no sooner than Abd Munaf had died, his sons began to have rows with their cousins, sons of Abd ad-Dar, which would have given rise to dissension and fighting among the whole tribe of Quraysh, had it not been for a peace treaty, whereby posts were reallocated so as to preserve feeding and providing water for pilgrims for the sons of Abd Munaf, while in Nadwa house, the flag and the doorkeeping of Al-Kaaba were maintained for the sons of Abd ad-Dar. The sons of Abd Munaf, however, cast the lot for their charge, and consequently left the charge of food and water giving to Hashim bin Abd Munaf, upon whose death the charge was taken over by a brother of his called al-Muttalib bin Abd Manaf, and afterwards by Abd al-Muttalib bin Hashim, the Prophet's grandfather, whose sons assumed this position until the rise of Islam, during which Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib was in charge. Ibn Hisham 129-179. 19. Msa Niu. Many other posts were distributed among people of Quraysh for establishing the pillars of a new democratic petite state with government offices and councils similar to those of today. Enlisted as follows are some of these posts. 1. Casting the lots for the idols was allocated to Bani Juma. 2. Noting of offers and sacrifices, settlement of disputes and relevant issues, were to lie in the hands of Bani Sam. 3. Consultation was to go to Bani Asad. 4. Organization of blood money and fines was with Bani Tayyam. 5. Bearing the national banner was with Bani Umayyah. 6. The military institute, footmen and cavalry would be Bani Mazam's responsibility. 7. Bani Adi would function as foreign mediators. Tariq Ard al-Quran 2/104. 106. Rulership in Pan-Arabia. We have previously mentioned the Qattanid and Adnanite emigrations, and division of Arabia between these two tribes. Those tribes dwelling near Hira were subordinate to the Arabian king of Hira, while those dwelling in the Syrian semi-desert were under domain of the Arabian Ghassanide king, a sort of dependency that was in reality formal rather than actual. However, those living in the Hindar deserts enjoyed full autonomy. These tribes in fact had heads chosen by the whole tribe, which was a demi-government based on tribal solidarity and collective interests in defense of land and property. Heads of tribes enjoyed dictatorial privileges similar to those of kings, and were rendered full obedience and subordination in both war and peace. Rivalry among cousins for rulership, however, often drove them to outdo one another in entertaining guests, affecting generosity, wisdom and chivalry for the sole purpose of outranking their rivals, and gaining fame among people, especially poets who were the official spokesmen at the time. Heads of tribes and masters had special claims to spoils of war, such as the quarter of the spoils, whatever he chose for himself, or found on his way back, or even the remaining indivisible spoils. The political situation. The three Arab regions adjacent to foreigners suffered great weakness and inferiority. The people there were either masters or slaves, rulers or subordinates. Masters, especially the foreigners, had claim to every advantage. Slaves had nothing but responsibilities to shoulder. In other words, arbitrary autocratic rulership brought about encroachment on the rights of subordinates, ignorance, oppression, iniquity, injustice and hardship, and turning them into people groping in darkness and ignorance, viz. Fertile land which rendered its fruits to the rulers and men of power, to extravagantly dissipate on their pleasures and enjoyments, whims and desires, tyranny and aggression. The tribes living near these regions were fluctuating. 20. Msa Niu. Between Syria and Iraq, whereas those living inside Arabia were disunited and governed by tribal conflicts and racial and religious disputes. They had neither a king to sustain their independence nor a supporter to seek advice from, or depend upon, in hardships. The rulers of Hijaz, however, were greatly esteemed and respected by the Arabs, and were considered as rulers and servants of the religious center. Rulership of Hijaz was, in fact, a mixture of secular and official precedents as well as religious leadership. They ruled among the Arabs in the name of religious leadership and always monopolized the custodianship of the holy sanctuary and its neighborhood. They looked after the interests of Al-Kaaba visitors and were in charge of putting Abraham's code into effect. They even had such offices and departments like those of the parliaments of today. However, they were too weak to carry the heavy burden, as this evidently came to light during the Abyssinian-Ethiopian invasion. 21. Religions of the Arabs. Msa Niu. Most of the Arabs had complied with the call of Ishmael, AWS, and professed the religion of his father Abraham, AWS. They had worshipped all, professed his oneness and followed his religion a long time until they forgot part of what they had been reminded of. However, they still maintained such fundamental beliefs such as monotheism as well as various other aspects of Abraham's religion, until the time when a chief of Khuza'ah, namely Amr bin Luhai, who was renowned for righteousness, charity, reverence and care for religion, and was granted unreserved love and obedience by his tribesmen, came back from a trip to Syria where he saw people worship idols, a phenomenon he approved of and believed it to be righteous. Since Syria was the locus of messengers and scriptures, he brought with him an idol, Hubal, which he placed in the middle of Al-Kaaba and summoned people to worship it. Readily enough, paganism spread all over Makkah and, thence, to Hijaz, people of Makkah being custodians of not only the sacred house but the whole haram as well. A great many idols, bearing different names, were introduced into the area. Mukhtasar Sirat Ar Rasul p.12, an idol called Manat, for instance, was worshipped in a place known as Al-Mashalal, near Qadid on the Red Sea, another, Al-Lat, in Taif, a third, Al-Uzza, in the valley of Nakhla, and so on and so forth. Polytheism prevailed and the number of idols increased everywhere in Hijaz. It was even mentioned that Amr bin Luhai, with the help of a jinn companion who told him that the idols of Noah's folk, Wad, Suwa, Yagath, Ya'uk and Nasr, were buried in Jeddah, dug them out and took them to Tihama. Upon pilgrimage time, the idols were distributed among the tribes to take back home. Bukhari 1-222, every tribe and house had their own idols, and the sacred house was also overcrowded with them. On the Prophet's conquest of Makkah, 360 idols were found around Al-Kaaba. He broke them down and had them removed and burned up. Mukhtasar Sirat Ar Rasul page 13-54. Polytheism and worship of idols became the most prominent feature of the religion of pre-Islam Arabs despite alleged profession of Abraham's religion. Traditions and ceremonies of the worship of their idols had been mostly created by Amr bin Luhai, and were deemed as good innovations rather than deviations from Abraham's religion. Some features of their worship of idols were 1. Self-devotion to the idols, seeking refuge with them, acclamation of their names, calling for their help in hardship, and supplication to them for fulfillment of wishes, hopefully that the idols, i.e., heathen gods, would mediate with all for the fulfillment of people's wishes. 2. Performing pilgrimage to the idols, circumrotation round them, self-abasement and even prostrating themselves before them. 3. Seeking favor of idols through various kinds of sacrifices and immolations, which is mentioned in the core IC verses, and that which is sacrificed slaughtered on Nusub stone altars. Al-Quran 5-3, also says, 22, Msa Niu, eat not, O believers, of that meat on which Allah's name has not been pronounced at the time of the slaughtering of the animal. Al-Quran 6-121, 4. Consecration of certain portions of food, drink, cattle, and crops to idols. Surprisingly enough, portions were also consecrated to Allah himself, but people often found reasons to transfer parts of Allah's portion to idols, but never did the opposite. To this effect, the core IC verses go, and they assign to Allah a share of the tilth and cattle which He has created, and they say, this is for all, according to their pretending, and this is for our Allah's so-called partners, but the share of their Allah's so-called partners reaches not all, while the share of all reaches their Allah's so-called partners. Evil is the way they judge. Al-Quran 6-136, 5. Currying favors with these idols through votive offerings of crops and cattle, to which effect the core goes, and according to their pretending, they say that such and such cattle and crops are forbidden, and none should eat of them except those whom we allow. And they say there are cattle forbidden to be used for burden or any other work, and cattle on which at slaughtering the name of Allah is not pronounced, lying against Him all. Al-Quran 6-138, 6. Dedication of certain animals such as Bahira, Saiba, Wasila and Hami to idols, which meant sparing such animals from useful work for the sake of these heathen gods. Bahira, as reported by the well-known historian Ibn Ishaq, was daughter of Saiba, which was a female camel that gave birth to 10 successive female animals, but no male ones, was set free and forbidden to yoke, burden or being sheared off its wool, or milked but for guests to drink from. And so was done to all her female offspring, which were given the name Bahira, after having their ears slit. The Wasila was a female sheep, which had 10 successive female daughters in 5 pregnancies. Any new births from this Wasila were assigned only for male people. The Hami was a male camel which produced 10 progressive females, and was thus similarly forbidden. In mention of this, the core IC verses go, all has not instituted things like Bahira a she-camel whose milk was spared for the idols, and nobody was allowed to milk it, or a Saiba a she-camel let loose for free pasture for their false gods, e.g. idols, etc., and nothing was allowed to be carried on it, or a Wasila a she-camel set free for idols, because it has given birth to a she-camel at its first delivery and then again gives birth to a she-camel at its second delivery, or a stallion camel freed from work for their idols, after it had finished a number of copulations assigned for it. All these animals were liberated in honor of idols as practiced by pagan Arabs in the pre-Islamic period. But those who disbelieve invent lies against all, and most of them have no understanding. Al-Quran 5-103, also says, 23, Msa Niu, and they say, what is in the bellies of such and such cattle milk or fetus, is for our males alone, and forbidden to our females, girls and women, but, if it is born dead, then all have shares therein. Al-Quran 6-139, it has been authentically reported that such superstitions were first invented by Amr bin Luhai. Bukhari 1-499, the Arabs believed that such idols, or heathen gods, would bring them nearer to all, led them to him, and mediate with him for their sake, to which effect, the core goes, we worship them only that they may bring us near to all? Al-Quran 39-3, and they worship besides all? Things that hurt them not, nor profit them, and they say, these are our intercessors with all? Al-Quran 10:18, another divinatory tradition among the Arabs was casting of aslam, i.e. featherless arrows, which were of three kinds. One showing yes, another no, and a third was blank, which they used to do in case of serious matters like travel, marriage and the like. If the lot showed yes, they would do, if no, they would delay for the next year. Other kinds of aslam were cast for water, blood money, or showed, from you, not from you, or mulsak, consociated. In cases of doubt in filiation they would resort to the idol of Hubal, with 100 camel gift, for the arrow caster. Only the arrows would then decide the sort of relationship. If the arrow showed from you, then it was decided that the child belonged to the tribe. If it showed from others, he would then be regarded as an ally, but if consociated appeared, the person would retain his position but with no lineage or alliance contract. Muhadrat Tariq, Al-Umam al-Islamiyya 156, Ibn Hisham 152,153. This was very much like gambling and arrow shafting, whereby they used to divide the meat of the camels they slaughtered according to this tradition. Moreover, they used to have a deep conviction in the tidings of soothsayers, diviners, and astrologers. A soothsayer used to traffic in the business of foretelling future events and claim knowledge of private secrets, and having jinn subordinates who would communicate the news to him. Some soothsayers claimed that they could uncover the unknown by means of a granted power, while other diviners boasted they could divulge the secrets through a cause and effect inductive process that would lead to detecting a stolen commodity, location of a theft, a stray animal, and the like. The astrologer belonged to a third category who used to observe the stars and calculate their movements and orbits, whereby he would foretell the future. Mirqat al-Mafati 2/2, 3, lending credence to this news constituted a clue to their conviction that attached special significance to the movements of particular stars with regard to rainfall. Muslim within Nawawi 159. The belief in signs as betokening future events was, of course, common among the Arabians. Some days and months and particular animals were regarded as ominous. They also believed that the soul of a murdered person would fly in the wilderness and would never rest at rest until revenge was taken. Superstition was rampant. 24. Msa Niu. Should a deer or bird, when released, turn right, then what they embarked on would be regarded auspicious, otherwise they would get pessimistic and withhold from pursuing it. Bukhari with footnotes of Ahmad Ali Saharanpuri 2,851,857. People of pre-Islamic period, whilst believing in superstition, they still retained some of the Abrahamic traditions, such as devotion to the holy sanctuary, circumambulation, observance of pilgrimage, the vigil on Arafah, and offering sacrifices. All of these were observed fully despite some innovations that adulterated these holy rituals. Quraysh, for example, out of arrogance, feeling of superiority to other tribes and pride in their custodianship of the sacred house, would refrain from going to Arafah with the crowd. Instead they would stop short at Muzdalifah. The noble corps rebuked and told them, then depart from the place whence all the people depart. Al-Quran 2-199, Ibn Hisham 1-199, Bukhari 1-226. Another heresy, deeply established in their social tradition, dictated that they would not eat dried yogurt or cooked fat, nor would they enter a tent made of camel hair, or seek shade unless in a house of adobe bricks, so long as they were committed to the intention of pilgrimage. They also, out of a deeply rooted misconception, denied pilgrims, other than Makkans, access to the food they had brought when they wanted to make pilgrimage or lesser pilgrimage. They ordered pilgrims coming from outside Makkah to circumambulate al-Kaaba in Quraysh uniform clothes, but if they could not afford them, men were to do so in a state of nudity, and women with only some piece of cloth to hide their groins. All says in this concern, O children of Adam, take your adornment by wearing your clean clothes, while praying and going round the tawaf of the Kaaba. Al-Quran 7:31. If men or women were generous enough to go round al-Kaaba in their clothes, they had to discard them after circumambulation for good. Bukhari 1:226. Ibn Hisham 1:202. When the Makkans were in a pilgrimage consecration state, they would not enter their houses through the doors but through holes they used to dig in the back walls. They used to regard such behavior as deeds of piety and God-fearing. This practice was prohibited by the Qur'an. It is not al-bir piety, righteousness, etc. that you enter the houses from the back, but al-bir is the quality of the one who fears all. So enter houses through their proper doors, and fear all, that you may be successful. Al-Quran 2-189. Such was the religious life in Arabia: polytheism, idolatry, and superstition. Judaism, Christianity, Magianism and Sabianism, however, could find their ways easily into Arabia. 25. Msa Neu. The migration of the Jews from Palestine to Arabia passed through two phases. First, as a result of the pressure to which they were exposed, the destruction of their temple, and taking most of them as captives to Babylon, at the hand of the king Bukhtanasar. In the year BC 587, some Jews left Palestine for Hijaz and settled in the northern areas whereof. The second phase started with the Roman occupation of Palestine under the leadership of Roman Buts in 70 AD. This resulted in a tidal wave of Jewish migration into Hijaz and Yathrib, Khaybar and Tama, in particular. Here, they made proselytes of several tribes, built forts and castles, and lived in villages. Judaism managed to play an important role in the pre-Islam political life. When Islam dawned on that land, there had already been several famous Jewish tribes: Kabir, al-Mustalik, and Nadir, Qurayza and Kanuka. In some versions, the Jewish tribes counted as many as 20. Kab Jazirat al-Arab, p.151. Judaism was introduced into Yemen by someone called Asad Abi Karb. He had gone to fight in Yathrib, and there he embraced Judaism and then went back, taking with him 2 rabbis from Bani Qurayza to instruct the people of Yemen in this new religion. Judaism found a fertile soil there to propagate and gain adherents. After his death, his son Yusuf du Nawaz rose to power, attacked the Christian community in Najran and ordered them to embrace Judaism. When they refused, he ordered that a pit of fire be dug and all the Christians indiscriminately be dropped to burn therein. Estimates say that between 20 to 40,000 Christians were killed in that human massacre. The related part of that story in Al-Buruj Zodiacal Signs chapter. Tafhim al-Quran 6-297, Ibn Hisham 1/20-36. Christianity had first made its appearance in Arabia following the entry of the Abyssinian, Ethiopian and Roman colonists into that country. The Abyssinian, Ethiopian colonization forces in league with Christian missions entered Yemen as a retaliatory reaction for the iniquities of Du Nawaz, and started vehemently to propagate their faith ardently. They even built a church and called it Yemeni al-Kaaba with the aim of directing the Arab pilgrimage caravans towards Yemen, and then made an attempt to demolish the sacred house in Makkah. The Almighty, however, did punish them and made an example of them, here and hereafter. Tafhim al-Quran 6-297, Ibn Hisham 1/20-36. A Christian missionary called Phimeon, and known for his ascetic behavior and working miracles, had likewise infiltrated into Najran. There he called people to Christianity, and by virtue of his honesty and truthful devotion, he managed to persuade them to respond positively to his invitation and embrace Christianity. The principal tribes that embraced Christianity were Ghassan, Taglib, Tai, and some Himyarite kings, as well as other tribes living on the borders of the Roman Empire. Magianism was also popular among the Arabs living in the neighborhood of Persia, Iraq, Bahrain, Al-Awz, number 146, and some areas on the Arabian Gulf Coast. Some Yemenis are also reported to have professed Magianism during the Persian occupation. As for Sabianism, excavations in Iraq revealed that it had been popular amongst Chaldean folks, the Syrians and Yemenis. With the advent of Judaism and Christianity, however, Sabianism began to give way to the new religions, although it retained some followers mixed or adjacent to the Magians in Iraq and the Arabian Gulf. Tariq Ard al-Quran 2-193-208, 26. The religious situation. Msa Niu. Such was the religious life of the Arabians before the advent of Islam. The role that the religions prevalent played was so marginal, in fact it was next to nothing. The polytheists, who faked Abrahamism, were so far detached from its precepts, and totally oblivious of its imminent good manners. They plunged into disobedience and ungodliness, and developed certain peculiar religious superstitions that managed to leave a serious impact on the religious and socio-political life in the whole of Arabia. Judaism turned into abominable hypocrisy in league with hegemony. Rabbis turned into lords to the exclusion of the Lord. They got involved in the practice of dictatorial subjection of people and calling their subordinates to account for the least word or idea. Their sole target turned into acquisition of wealth and power, even if it were at the risk of losing their religion, or the emergence of atheism and disbelief. Christianity likewise opened its doors wide to polytheism, and got too difficult to comprehend as a heavenly religion. As a religious practice, it developed a sort of peculiar medley of man and God. It exercised no bearing whatsoever on the souls of the Arabs, who professed it simply because it was alien to their style of life and did not have the least relationship with their practical life. People of other religions were similar to the polytheists with respect to their inclinations, dogmas, customs and traditions. 27. Aspects of pre-Islamic Arabian society. Msa Niu. After the research we have made into the religious and political life of Arabia, it is appropriate to speak briefly about the social, economic and ethical conditions prevalent therein. Social life of the Arabs. The Arabian society presented a social medley, with different and heterogeneous social strata. The status of the woman among the nobility recorded an advanced degree of esteem. The woman enjoyed a considerable portion of free will, and her decision would most often be enforced. She was so highly cherished that blood would be easily shed in defense of her honor. In fact, she was the most decisive key to bloody fight or friendly peace. These privileges notwithstanding, the family system in Arabia was wholly patriarchal. The marriage contract rested completely in the hands of the woman's legal guardian, whose words with regard to her marital status could never be questioned. On the other hand, there were other social strata where prostitution and indecency were rampant and in full operation. Abu Da, on the authority of Aisha, reported 4 kinds of marriage in pre-Islamic Arabia. The first was similar to present-day marriage procedures, in which case a man gives his daughter in marriage to another man after a dowry has been agreed on. In the second, the husband would send his wife, after the menstruation period, to cohabit with another man in order to conceive. After conception her husband would, if he desired, have a sexual intercourse with her. A third kind was that a group of less than 10 men would have sexual intercourse with a woman. If she conceived and gave birth to a child, she would send for these men, and nobody could abstain. They would come together to her house. She would say, "You know what you have done. I have given birth to a child and it is your child," pointing to one of them. The man meant would have to accept. The fourth kind was that a lot of men would have sexual intercourse with a certain woman, a whore. She would not prevent anybody. Such women used to put a certain flag at their gates to invite in anyone who liked. If this whore got pregnant and gave birth to a child, she would collect those men, and a seeress would tell whose child it was. The appointed father would take the child and declare him, her his own. When Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, declared Islam in Arabia, he cancelled all these forms of sexual contacts except that of present Islamic marriage. Abu Dawud, the Book of Marriage. Women always accompanied men in their wars. The winners would freely have sexual intercourse with such women, but disgrace would follow the children, conceived in this way all their lives. Pre-Islam Arabs had no limited number of wives. They could marry 2 sisters at the same time, or even the wives of their fathers if divorced or widowed. Divorce was to a very great extent in the power of the husband. Abu Dawud, the Book of Marriage. The obscenity of adultery prevailed almost among all social classes except few men and women whose self-dignity prevented them from committing such an act. Free women were in much better conditions than the female slaves who constituted the greatest calamity. It seemed that the greatest majority of pre-Islam Arabs did not. 28. Msa Niu, feel ashamed of committing this obscenity. Abu Da reported. A man stood up in front of Prophet Muhammad, pbuh, and said, "O Prophet of all? That boy is my son. I had sexual intercourse with his mother in the pre-Islamic period. The Prophet, pbuh, said, "No claim in Islam for pre-Islamic affairs. The child is to be attributed to the one on whose bed it was born, and stoning is the lot of a fornicator." Abu Dawud, chapter, "The child is to the one on whose bed it was born." With respect to the pre-Islam Arab's relation with his offspring, we see that life in Arabia was paradoxical and presented a gloomy picture of contrasts. Whilst some Arabs held children dear to their hearts and cherished them greatly, others buried their female children alive because an illusory fear